Picture this. You're 7 years old. You live in a quiet mountain village in southern China. Your mornings are filled with smoke from cooking fires, prayers whispered by your father, and stories told by your mother in a language few outside your valley understand. You help carry water. You memorize verses from the Quran. You chase goats through the rice terraces. You are a child. Until the soldiers come, they accuse your family of rebellion. They kill your father in front of you. They drag you away, screaming, kicking, begging, and then they bring out the knife. No one explains. No one shows mercy. No one cares that you're just a child. Your name is stripped away. Your body is broken, and your new life begins as a eunuch, a servant, a ghost in silk robes. But what the Empire didn't know is that the boy they mutilated would one day command the largest naval fleet the world had ever seen, that he would make kings kneel, carry the emperor's name across continents, and shape the destiny of nations without ever holding a throne. That despite being castrated at 7, he would be crowned at 17. His name was Zheng He, and this is his story, not just of survival, but of power, of obedience and resistance, of what happens when the most broken among us learn to rule from the shadows. The morning sun has just begun to cut through the mist rolling off the mountains of Yunnan, the southern edge of what will soon be the Ming Empire. Your family lives in a simple, earthen home, tucked between green hills and rice fields. You help your mother grind grain, bring water from the well, and memorize verses of the Quran by candlelight under your father's watchful eye. Your father tells you that your blood is noble, that your ancestors were warriors from Central Asia, brought to Yunnan generations ago. He calls you brave. He says your people have survived dynasties, floods, and betrayal. He says your name means something. You believe him. You chase chickens around the courtyard. You climb trees barefoot. You speak Turkish at home, Arabic at prayer, and a bit of Chinese at the market. Your world is small, and it is safe. Until the soldiers come. They arrive just after dawn, Ming soldiers dressed in black lacquered armor, faces hard as carved stone. They carry banners you've never seen before, red and gold and fierce. One of them reads aloud from a scroll in Mandarin that none of you understand. He calls your father a traitor, a rebel, an enemy of the state. You don't understand. Your father kneels, not to them, but to you. He grabs your shoulders. His eyes are locked on yours. He says, "Don't forget your name. Don't forget your God." Then one of the soldiers drives a spear through his back. You scream. They bind your hands and feet. They drag you, along with dozens of boys from nearby villages, into a wooden cage mounted on a wagon. Some are older, some barely walking. You call out for your mother. You cry until your throat dries and cracks. But no one comes. The soldiers do not speak to you. When one of the boys wets himself, they beat him until he stops moving. When another tries to run, they cut his leg and let him limp the rest of the way. You travel for days, then weeks. Your village is gone, your father is dead, and you are being taken into the heart of an empire. When the cart finally stops, it's at a compound surrounded by walls taller than your home. You are told nothing, just herded into a cold stone room. They take your clothes, wash you in freezing water, paint your body with bitter-smelling herbs. Then they bring the knife. You're too tired to fight, too scared to scream. They hold you down. One at your shoulders, one at your legs. There's no prayer, no explanation, no kindness, only steel, only blood, only silence. You do not know the words for what has happened to you. You will not understand for years that you have been castrated, that you will never grow hair on your face, that you will never be a father, that you will never feel the way other men feel. Your voice will never deepen. Your body will remain in some cruel twilight between boy and man. And no one, not the soldiers, not the doctor, not the other boys, ever says why. Weeks pass. Some of the boys die from infection, fever, bleeding that doesn't stop. You survive. But something in you has stopped moving. They feed you rice, broth, dried fish, just enough to keep you alive. They shave your head. They give you a number. They say your name is gone. You try to pray at night quietly, whispering verses your father taught you, but they catch you and they beat you. They say, "You serve the emperor now, not your God." You never pray aloud again. Eventually, you are brought into the inner court of the Ming Palace in Nanjing. The capital city is nothing like your home. It smells of smoke and horse dung and hot oil. Everything is loud and fast and far too large. But inside the palace walls, everything is silent, not peaceful dead. You are not allowed to speak unless spoken to. You learn quickly that disobedience earns more than beatings. It earns isolation, hunger, shackles. So you learn to vanish. You speak in whispers, walk in shadows, serve tea without looking into anyone's eyes. The other eunuchs, older boys, men who've survived longer, treat you with either indifference or cruelty. Some demand your food, others demand worse. You do not trust them. You do not trust anyone. You begin to forget your mother's face. You begin to forget your father's voice. You begin to forget your own name, but you survive. That becomes your skill. Survival. You're assigned to a minor storage chamber in the outer palace, taking inventory of silks, spices, and porcelain tribute from foreign kingdoms. You teach yourself to read. No one notices. No one cares. But you watch. You listen. You learn what everyone else misses. You remember every name, every face, every schedule, every whisper. You become invisible and invaluable. And then one day he notices you, the Prince of Di. He is not yet emperor. He is still a general, a warlord, a power in the north. But he is different. He walks among the servants. He speaks directly to you. He asks questions, hard ones. Questions about logistics, shipments, which officials are hoarding grain, who's stealing ink and claiming it came from Tibet. You answer him precisely, calmly. He smiles. Not kindly, but calculatingly. He says, "This one remembers everything." From that moment on, you are his. You are transferred to his household. You carry messages, arrange shipments, oversee stable inventories. You sleep less, eat less. But you are no longer just another eunuch boy. You are the boy who knows everything, and he begins to trust you, even as he begins to prepare for war. Because Di is not content with being a prince, his nephew, the emperor, has begun to fear him, cut his power, target his allies. And now, Di is planning something that will change the empire forever. A rebellion, a civil war. And you are only 13 years old. But you will ride with him, not as a soldier, not as a servant, but as something else entirely. You are 13 years old, and the empire is beginning to tear itself apart. You're still a boy, but not in any way that matters anymore. The body they broke years ago in the castration house has healed over. You're taller now, quieter, your limbs are long, your face unreadable. You wear dark robes, walk without sound, and you've learned how to make yourself useful in 100 ways. You memorize maps, supply routes, merchant schedules. You notice what servants steal from the kitchens. You overhear court gossip and remember every name. And most importantly, you serve Di, the Prince of Yan, fourth son of the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty, commander of the northern armies, protector of the northern frontier. But not for long, because Di is no longer playing the role of loyal prince. He's raising troops, stockpiling weapons, sending secret messages to generals across the empire. He calls it securing the border. But you've read the scrolls. You've watched him sharpen the knives himself. He's preparing for war. The usurper's rise, the emperor on the throne, is not the one Di wanted, not the one the generals respected, not the one the army swore loyalty to. It's his nephew, the Jianwen emperor, barely older than a boy himself. Di doesn't trust him, with good reason. Since taking power, the new emperor has exiled, arrested, or executed every one of Di's brothers. Di is next. So he makes the only move a cornered man can make. He rebels. You're there when he gathers his top commanders behind closed doors. You're standing by the silk-covered wall, unseen, silent, listening. He doesn't raise his voice. He says, "I do not rebel against the throne. I rebel against the traitors who whisper into it." No one argues. They know what's coming. They all do. You, the ghost in the army, you are not a general, you are not a soldier, you are a eunuch, but he takes you anyway. When Di marches north with thousands of troops, you ride beside him. At night, you sleep on the ground like the others. At daybreak, you prepare the movement orders, the food quotas, the coded messages to allied garrisons. You do not carry a sword, but you carry every secret, every route, every ration list, every defection. You are not seen as a threat, but you are more dangerous than most of the men holding weapons. They call you the silent clerk. They joke that you don't sleep. They don't know how close duty keeps you or why, but they soon find out. The fires of Nanjing. For a year, the rebellion wages across northern China. Cities fall, fortresses burn. One of Zhu Di's sons dies in a siege, but still he advances, and you are there. Zhu Di reads your reports, trusts your instincts, sends you ahead with small retinues to negotiate with wavering governors, always in disguise, always underestimated. You're just a eunuch, they think, just a servant, and yet you bring cities to heel with words alone. By the time you reach the gates of Nanjing, the capital, your army is enormous. You're 16 now, and you are feared. The city resists. Zhu Di lays siege. Fires rage through the outskirts. When the emperor's palace catches flame, some say it was an accident, others say it was a signal. The Jianwen emperor vanishes in the chaos. Some say he died in the fire, others say he escaped in disguise. No body is ever found. But it doesn't matter, because Zhu Di enters the palace, and you walk beside him. The dragon throne. He changes everything. He renames himself the Yongle Emperor, the perpetual happiness ruler. He claims the throne by divine right, as if the mandate of heaven was passed to him by the wind itself. And yet, he never forgets that he won it with blood. Most of his generals are rewarded with titles, land, concubines. But you receive something greater. You're given authority. They say it in whispers. The eunuch who became a general. You're officially named to the Directorate of Ceremonial Affairs. But that's only the beginning. You have the ear of the emperor. You are sent to inspect coastal defenses. You oversee tax shipments. You interrogate treasonous officials, sometimes with velvet gloves, sometimes with iron. And you are only 17 years old. They expected you to be a broken boy in the shadow of power. Instead, you have become a shadow that shapes power itself. The making of a fleet Yongle dreams not only of ruling China, but of showing the entire world who rules the seas. You listen as he speaks late at night about merchants from India, emissaries from Arabia, pirates in Southeast Asia, and rumors of kings in faraway lands who've never even heard of the Son of Heaven. He wants them all to kneel, but to do that he needs more than armies. He needs ships, hundreds of them, and there is only one person he trusts to oversee this colossal undertaking, you. He gives you command over the great shipyards of Nanjing. You walk among thousands of workers as they bend wood, stitch sails, shape iron nails by hand. You don't yell, you whisper, and somehow everything gets done. Under your supervision, the greatest fleet the world has ever known begins to take shape. The world begins to listen you. Walk through the rows of half-built ships, monsters carved from teak and pine, some over 400 feet long, with 12 sails and multi-level decks. They will carry not just soldiers but ambassadors, translators, astronomers, artists, and vast tributes, porcelain, silk, lacquerware, coins stamped with the emperor's name. But they will also carry your will, because the emperor doesn't want war. He wants submission, voluntary tribute, declarations of awe, bows from kings and gifts from gods, and if they refuse, well, the ships carry cannons too, and you will be on board. The transformation. The palace changes. You are no longer whispered about as a curiosity. You are studied, respected, feared. You walk beside the grand secretaries, not behind them. You answer only to the emperor, and when he gazes down from the dragon throne during court meetings, his eyes find yours across the marble floor. No one speaks of your past now. Not your village, not the knife, not the years you spent weeping into a straw mat in a stone cell. All they see is Zheng He admiral, emissary, architect of the sea. But late at night, when the corridors are silent and the lanterns burn low, you sit alone in your chamber and trace your fingers over a folded scrap of cloth. the prayer cloth your mother pressed into your hands the morning you were taken. You still remember the sound of your father's voice. You still remember the taste of bread baked over a village fire. But you cannot return. You are no longer He. You are something else now. You are the Empire's ghost. And soon, the entire world will know your name. You are 17 years old. You stand at the edge of the docks in Longjiang, the imperial shipyard outside Nanjing, staring at what looks like a forest of masts, beams and flags. The sky is filled with the smell of sawdust and salt, smoke from forge fires, and the distant sounds of hammers striking iron, rope being hauled, and men shouting in dialects from every corner of the empire. What you're witnessing isn't a navy. It's a floating empire being built from scratch by your order, because you, the boy who was taken, cut, and broken, have now been named Admiral of the Western Oceans, and your mission is clear. Sail beyond the horizon. Make the world kneel. Bring back tribute. Bring back glory. Let them know the dragon rules the sea. The ships of heaven. You walk the length of the flagship being built for you. It takes 32 paces from bow to stern. The workers say it will be the largest wooden ship the world has ever seen. Over 400 feet long with 9 masts. It will carry soldiers, scribes, doctors, translators, musicians, diplomats and priests, and weapons. Always weapons. Cannons forged in the capital. Fire arrows. Iron bolts that can tear a boat in half. But this isn't a war fleet, not yet. You're not just building ships. You're building the Emperor's reputation. You're building fear. Why you? Some at court whisper that you shouldn't have been chosen. They say it behind closed doors, that it's unnatural, that it's dangerous, that a eunuch, a man without family, without heirs, without the blood of nobles should not command this kind of power. You're not a Confucian scholar. You were never supposed to rise past serving tea. But the Emperor does not trust his scholars. He trusts you. You who never took a bribe. You who have no lineage to protect. You who cannot sire sons and build dynasties. You are clean by force, by pain, by necessity. And that makes you the perfect weapon. Training for the unknown. You train your officers relentlessly. Many are experienced sailors, but none have sailed beyond the familiar coastlines of China. You drill them on navigation by stars, on monsoon wind cycles, on how to negotiate with kings, or crush them. You create a floating city of discipline. You order the translation of Arabic, Tamil, Persian, Swahili. You memorize maps collected from Muslim merchants, Hindu scholars, and Buddhist monks. You learn about spices you've never smelled, gods you've never heard of, ports where gold is traded like grain. This is not a voyage. This is a projection of civilization, and you are its tip of the spear. A fleet like no other. When it's finally ready, your fleet numbers 317 ships, 28, 0 men, carpenters, cooks, scribes, translators, doctors, horsemen, guards, exotic goods for diplomacy, porcelain, silk, jade, lacquerware, scrolls. Your fleet includes treasure ships, floating palaces for tribute and ambassadors, supply ships packed with grain, water barrels, dried meats, troop transports housing, elite palace guards, horse ships with entire stables on board, warships with armoured hulls and cannon decks. No other nation on Earth has anything even remotely comparable. European kingdoms at this time still sail on ships small enough to fit inside your storage hulls. They do not know what's coming. But they will. Departure. The morning your fleet sets sail, the Emperor himself watches from the upper terrace of the Forbidden City. You wear imperial robes, not eunuch silks. You stand atop the deck of your treasure ship face still, eyes sharp, voice booming orders. You do not show emotion, but deep inside, you remember that mountain village. You remember your father's voice, and you wonder, is this vengeance, or is this surrender? You push the thought down, because the wind is rising, the drums are sounding, and you, the Empire's ghost, are now the master of the sea, the philosophy of power. Every port you enter is a test. You arrive not as a conqueror, but never as an equal. You wear silk, while the local kings wear cotton. You bring porcelain while they trade in coconuts. You quote Confucius, Buddha, Muhammad, depending on who's listening. You speak softly, but your cannon decks are visible at all times. You give gifts first, then demand tribute. You are not interested in trade, you are interested in obedience. Resentment in the court. Back home, the Confucian ministers grow uneasy. They call your voyages extravagant. They say you drain the treasury. They whisper that you're amassing too much personal power. They hate that a eunuch commands more men than any general. They hate that foreign kings bow to you instead of the emperor. But they forget one thing. You don't care. You have no legacy to protect, no family name to pass on. You serve only one master, the Dragon Throne, and your loyalty cannot be bought or inherited. It was paid for in blood. Legacy begins. In each place you go, Champa, Java, Malacca, Sri Lanka, you leave behind something more powerful than threats, memory. Children in island villages will one day tell stories about your sails blotting out the sun, about the day the Chinese god came in a floating castle, gave gifts of silk and gold, and told their kings to bow or burn. They won't remember your title. They may not even remember your name, but they will remember your shadow, the eyes of the emperor. Your voyages are more than diplomacy. They are tests. The emperor watches from afar, eager to know how other kingdoms respond to his name. He is aging, growing restless, wondering if the world beyond the seas holds threats or rivals, and you are his instrument. You return to Nanjing after each voyage with detailed reports. Who bowed, who resisted, who lied, who feared. You bring giraffes from Africa, pepper from Calicut, pearls from Arabia, exotic dancers from the Maldives. You also bring prisoners and heads. Not many, but just enough to remind the court what you're capable of. Reflections. At night, in your private quarters aboard the flagship, you sit alone. Your body remains unchanged, your voice still smooth, unbroken. You sleep in silks, surrounded by scrolls, guarded by men who would die for you. But still, you remember. You remember the cold stone of the castration chamber, the sound of your father's dying breath, the moment you forgot your own name. You think of the boys who died beside you, the ones who didn't survive. You wonder, do they see you now? Would they recognize you? Would they call you traitor or brother? You do not know, but the wind changes again, and you rise, because this was only the first voyage, and the emperor has already commanded 6 more. You are 19 years old, and you are no longer just a man. In some places, you are now a god. They chant your name in ports you've never heard of. Draw your likeness on temple walls. Leave offerings beside burning incense sticks. To the man who sails in castles of wood and silk, who commands dragons that float and roar, who arrives with gifts and departs with kings in chains. They don't know you were once a village boy. They don't know you were castrated by force, erased by empire, and rebuilt into something no child should ever become. They just know that when the sails appear on the horizon, Zheng He has come. The sea opens. Your ships part the Indian Ocean like a blade. Your men call it the Road of Tribute. It's not just warships and treasure ships that follow you. You bring linguists to speak for the emperor in 5 languages, spies to assess local politics before you even dock, astronomers to chart new stars for the imperial records, artists to paint portraits of every king who kneels, doctors to record diseases, remedies, herbs unknown to China. This is not trade, it's surveillance. It's domination by velvet glove and steel cannon, and you are the emperor's eyes, the sultan who defied you. In Sri Lanka, you dock at the port of Galle. The locals stare. They've never seen ships so massive, some over 9 masts, 4 decks high, with coloured sails and banners declaring the Dragon Throne's glory. At first, they bow. They bring coconuts, cinnamon bark, golden figurines, but the local king Alakashvara, a petty ruler, drunk on his own power, mocks your emissaries. He sends spies into your camps. He tries to block your messengers. He whispers that you are soft, that you are a eunuch pretending to be a general. So you do what you were never trained to do. You wage war. Under the cover of night, you march troops inland. You move faster than the king expects. Your scouts sabotage his supplies. By sunrise, his capital burns. By midday, the king himself kneels before you shackled, trembling. And when you return to Nanjing, he comes with you. You lead a parade through the imperial capital. 30 foreign envoys in chains, their crowns offered at your feet, your soldiers in gleaming armor, drums echoing across the palace walls. And at the front of it all, you, clad in crimson robes, eyes unreadable, the emperor's ghost made flesh, the gifts of the world. From Malacca, you bring camphor, parrots, gold coins stamped with Sanskrit. From Calicut, you bring black pepper, pearls, a royal decree recognizing Chinese supremacy. From Hormuz, you return with rare horses, dyed carpets, musicians with curved flutes and voices like wind. From Somalia, you bring leopards and ostriches. From Mogadishu, diplomats bearing ivory and tribute letters wrapped in perfumed silk. And from Melinda, a giraffe the first ever seen in China. It walks through the palace like a myth come to life. The emperor beams, and the court poets call you the heavenly envoy, the sea dragon, the one who tames oceans. But the ministers still murmur. They say, "You're becoming too powerful, too praised, too remembered." They don't say it to your face. They never would. The ghost of home. One night, anchored off the coast of Arabia, you climb to the highest deck of your flagship and stare into the dark. The call to prayer echoes faintly from a distant port. You close your eyes. It has been 12 years since you last whispered the name of your God out loud. You still remember the verses. You still remember your father's voice. But now, you command an empire that forbids your faith, silences your prayers, and rewards only obedience. You open your hand and unfold the ragged cloth you've kept hidden all these years. Your mother's prayer cloth. It smells faintly of ash now. You press it to your lips, and you do not cry. You no longer know how. The empire beyond the waves. You learn the politics of every port before you arrive. You know which king has 2 sons and which has 12 concubines. You know who is at war, who is in debt, who wants Chinese silk and who secretly resents it. Your ships become embassies. Your quarters a moving court. Every foreign noble is expected to bow, not just to you, but to the idea of the Son of Heaven watching from behind your eyes. Some bow willingly, others smile and lie. A few resist. You keep a list, and when you return to China, you hand it to the emperor personally. He reads it in silence, and then tells you to return. What the world thinks. To the Indian Ocean kingdoms, you are now legend. To Malaccans, a divine messenger who brought peace and law. To Arabs, a strange general who spoke fluent Arabic and quoted the Quran, then demanded tribute for a Buddhist emperor. To East Africans, a silent monarch who brought music and fire and left behind coins and silence. No one knows what you really are. Not a prince, not a priest, not a merchant, not a soldier, just a man without children, without a homeland, without a god, a man with sails instead of blood, a man who arrives with silk and cannons and leaves as a story whispered to children, enemies at court. You return to China for the 3rd time, to a capital buzzing with resentment. The Confucian scholars say you've spent too much, that your voyages are wasteful, that your fleet is a circus full of animals and gold, but empty of honor. They demand budget cuts, more focus on agriculture, less on showing off to foreigners. But the emperor laughs. He points to the treasures laid before him. He points to the letters from foreign kings, and he says, "You fear him because you cannot control him." They fall silent. For now, whispers of death. But you see it. The emperor coughs more often. His meals are smaller. His eyes are glassier. Zhu Di, the man who spared you, raised you, used you, is dying. And you know what comes next. His son, the Hongxi emperor, hates eunuchs, especially ones who command fleets larger than the army. Especially you. You are sailing into a storm not even your ships can outmaneuver. But that hasn't stopped you before, and it won't now. The world will remember. You return to the shipyard to prepare the 4th voyage. Your ship refurbished, reinforced, waits in the harbour like a beast hungering for wind. Young boys come to watch you board. They ask if you've really seen giraffes, if you've eaten fire peppers in Calicut, if you really made kings crawl on the deck. You smile, just a little, and step aboard. You do not tell them the truth, that you miss the silence of your village more than any palace, that you've forgotten the sound of your own name when spoken by someone who loved you, that you command the oceans because it is easier than remembering what was taken from you. Instead you say, "The world is very large, but the emperor is larger." Then the sails rise, and the sea takes you again. You are 24 years old, and for the first time in your adult life, you feel something close to fear, not fear of death. You've walked through storms, crossed kingdoms, and fought kings. This is something different, a creeping, silent kind of terror, because the only man who ever truly saw you, the man who made you admiral, who used your silence as a sword and your loyalty as a crown, is dying. And you know what happens when emperors die. The shadows change, and men like you vanish in them. The emperor with failing eyes, Zheng He, the Yongle emperor, the fire that consumed a dynasty and forged a new one, no longer walks the palace gardens. He coughs blood. His hands tremble. His voice, once a thunderclap, now croaks like dry reeds in the wind. You stand at his bedside. He looks at you with eyes sunken deep into shadow. He tries to speak, but the words don't come. You kneel. You take his hand. You say nothing, because there is nothing to say. You've always known this day would come. You just never thought it would come so soon. The son who hated you. When Zheng He dies, the court does not mourn. They pretend to. They hold ceremonies, burn incense, recite odes. But inside the great halls of the Forbidden City, the real game begins. Because the new emperor Hong Shi, Zheng He's son, does not see you as an instrument of glory. He sees you as a corruption, a symbol of everything wrong with his father's rule, a eunuch with power, a Muslim commanding Buddhists, a commoner outshining noble, a man with no bloodline who left kings grovelling. He strips away your funding. He declares the voyages extravagant and wasteful. Your shipyards are closed. Your fleet, those mighty floating cities, is docked, unused, rotting in the harbours. And you are silenced. You are not dismissed. Not publicly. That would be too obvious. Instead, you are reassigned, quietly, symbolically. You now oversee warehouse inventories in Nanjing. You are 25 years old, and already a relic, watching yourself decay. The silence is louder than any storm you faced at sea. You walk the gardens alone. No one bows. No one greets you. The boys who once followed you with admiration now avert their eyes. Your old quarters aboard the flagship are covered in dust. Your name fades from official dispatches. Your portraits are quietly removed from state walls. In a single winter you go from heavenly envoy to forgotten ghost. And yet, you do not rage, because this was always the truth. You were never meant to last. The return of the wind. But fate, like the ocean, shifts when no one expects. Hong Shi dies. Suddenly, mysteriously, his son, the Swan-Day Emperor, takes the throne, and this new emperor remembers your name. He grew up hearing your stories. He watched the parades you led. He saw kings kneel before you. And when he looks at the maps you brought back from Africa, India, and Arabia, he understands something the ministers do not, that your silence built more than ships. It built fear, prestige, mythology, and empires don't survive on farming alone. They survive on awe. The summons. You are called back to the palace. You think it might be a trap. You wear ceremonial robes anyway. You walk the same marble corridors where you once handed tribute to the dragon throne. Only now, your footsteps echo too loudly, and your bones ache more than they used to. The emperor receives you in private. No ministers, no fanfare. He is young, but his eyes are sharp. He does not bow. He says, simply, "One final voyage. You will remind the world who we are, resurrecting the dead." The docks in Longjiang are silent when you arrive. Your ships, your fleet, what's left of it, sits like bones under a dying sky. You walk among them slowly, touch the railings, the broken masts, the torn sails. You remember every name of every crewman who died bringing them this far. You speak to the shipwrights, to the suppliers, to the commanders who still remember your voice. You begin again. This time, you build smaller. Not 300 ships, only a few dozen, but still, they will carry soldiers, gifts, diplomats, and you. Because if this truly is your final voyage, then you will go as you lived, not a man, not a myth, but a shadow beneath the sails. The whispering court, they know you're sailing again, and the court trembles. They thought you were buried, they thought the knife had destroyed you, they thought age had softened you, but they were wrong. You are not a flower waiting to wilt. You are the storm returning to sea. The ghost sets sail. In the spring of 1431, your ships leave port once more. You are older now. Your hair is greying. Your back stiffens in the mornings. Your hands tremble more than they used to. But your eyes? Your eyes are still sharp. Your orders still carry the weight of thunder. You sail again to Calicut, to Hormuz, to Mecca, to the coasts of East Africa. You revisit kings who once bowed and make sure they still remember how. You remind the world that the Son of Heaven still watches and that his ghost still sails. Death at sea. Some say you died on that voyage, that your body gave out before you reached China again. Others say you returned quietly to Nanjing and were buried in a simple tomb, far from the marble of the palace or the blood-soaked halls of power. No one is sure, because your death was not recorded, at least not the way it should have been. No grand funeral, no official mourning period, no marble monument by the sea, just silence. The same silence you were born into, the same silence that followed you across kingdoms, the same silence that now claims your name, but not forgotten. And yet, centuries later, sailors in Sri Lanka still whisper your name at night. In Malacca, they still tell stories of your red-sailed ships. In Mombasa, your coins are still found buried beneath palace walls. And in China, when the wind shifts over the Yangtze River and the old ships groan in their dry docks, they say the admiral's ghost is walking, checking the sails, preparing, waiting for the next wind. You are 52 years old, and your body no longer belongs to you. Your knees ache with every stare. Your breath shortens at dawn. The wound that defined your life, that made you a eunuch, a tool, a symbol, now echoes through your bones like an ancient curse. But you're not done, because one last voyage remains, one final chapter to close the ocean's book, and you will not die on land. You will die in motion, as you always have. The seventh voyage begins. You call it a final inspection, a reaffirmation of alliances, a farewell gift from the Son of Heaven to the peoples of the ocean. But you know better. This is not diplomacy. It is ritual, an ending cloaked in silk, and you will play your part. Your fleet is smaller now, about 40 ships, enough to impress but not enough to threaten. You carry letters from the new emperor. You carry tribute for loyal rulers. You carry physicians, translators, and young court eunuchs who look at you like a myth they've read about. You carry pain too, but you don't show it. You never have. The sea still obeys. Even in your final year, you remain a master of the winds. You time the departure to match the monsoon cycle. You map the stars without needing to look. You remember the depth of every port from Lanka to Mecca, like it's carved into your skin. Your commanders whisper behind your back. Some say you're too frail, that you should have stayed behind, that this voyage might kill you. But they don't understand. You have no home to stay in. You are seaborne now. Everything else, land, family, silence, is just memory. The pilgrimage one of your stops is Mecca. You do not go ashore, but you stare at the direction of the Kaaba from the deck. You know the Qibla still. You remember the prayers your father whispered. You remember the cloth your mother pressed into your hand. You were not allowed to practice your faith for decades. But no one can ban memory. At night, when no one watches, you trace the verses in your mind. You whisper them into the sails. You wonder, will he forgive you? Will he even recognize you now? You begin coughing blood just past Hormuz. At first you ignore it. Then your legs begin to tremble when you walk. You give orders from a seated position. then lying down. Your officers grow nervous. The young eunuchs grow silent. You feel it coming. The darkness. You felt it chasing you since the day the knife took everything. Now it's almost here, and you are ready. The final morning off the coast of Calicut. You rise before dawn. You force your body to the top deck. 2 guards help you walk. You dismiss them. You stare out into the Indian Ocean. The sun rises slowly. The same sun that rose the morning your village was taken. The morning your father died. The morning you first stepped aboard a ship. You breathe it in. Salt, smoke, incense from a distant shore. You think, maybe this is the closest thing to peace I will ever know. And then darkness. What happened next, no one agrees on how you died. Some records say you collapsed that morning, and your body was brought back to China, entombed near Nanjing, where a simple grave bears your name. Others say you died at sea, wrapped in silk and weighted with coins, and your body was lowered into the ocean with full honours. Still others say you never died at all, that your flagship still sails on clouded nights, that you became one with the water, whispering to lost sailors, watching from beneath the waves. You became a myth the moment you stopped breathing, the grave that may be empty. Your official tomb still stands in Nusho Hill near Nanjing. It faces west toward Mecca, some say. Its inscription is modest. There are no golden dragons, no imperial decrees, just the name, Zheng He. But when it was excavated centuries later, it was found empty. No bones, no relics, only cloth. Silk, ceremonial items. Some say your body was never meant to rest on land, that the tomb is symbolic, that the ocean itself is your grave, and maybe it is. The memory that faded after your death, the voyages ended, the ministers finally won, the shipyards were dismantled, the maps you collected were locked away, some even burned. Your officers were reassigned. Your young protégés? Silenced, forgotten, and within a few decades, it was as if the greatest naval armada in world history had never existed. China turned inward, the oceans closed, and your name vanished from textbooks, from halls, from mouths. But you were not gone, because in Sri Lanka, your name remained carved on a stone stele in 3 languages, Chinese, Persian, and Tamil. In East Africa, Chinese coins and porcelain are still unearthed in sand. In Malacca, elders pass down legends of the giant ships and the soft-voiced emperor who never aged. In Arabia, merchant families still speak of the Chinese admiral who spoke the Quran like a scholar, and in the ships of Southeast Asia, carved into the beams of old fishing junks, they still write Ma He, Zheng He, the sea dragon, what they took from you. They will remember your accomplishments, your voyages, your diplomacy, your fleets. But what they forget, what they cannot bear to remember, is the price. You were taken as a boy, broken, reassembled, used as a weapon by one man, feared by others. You had no children, no partner, no name that was truly yours. You served, and in the end, you were buried either in water or silence, because the empire only ever saw you as a function, never as a soul. What you became, and yet you became more than they ever allowed you to be. You were not just a eunuch. You were the admiral of the Western Oceans, the emissary of the dragon throne, the shadow behind the sails, the silence that commanded empires. You were not born into greatness. You were carved into it by cruelty, by force, by will. You never wore a crown, but the world bowed anyway. You are dead, but you are not at rest, because the world you shaped is tearing you from it page by page, record by record, map by map. The halls you once walked have gone silent. The ships you once commanded have rotted at their moorings. The names you made famous have disappeared from the scrolls. The ministers who once bowed, as you pass now, pretend you never lived, and the empire you lifted on your back, it is pretending you were never there at all. It starts slowly, as silence always does. No great denunciation, no public condemnation, just absence. First, your voyages are reclassified in the archives, not as triumphs of diplomacy, but as excessive displays. Then your name is quietly removed from court recitations. Then your stele in the capital is taken down. The new historians call you a eunuch of unusual ambition, not an admiral, not a statesman, not a kingmaker, just a eunuch, as if that single word explains everything. For decades, the Confucian ministers whispered against you. You were a walking insult to their worldview. You were born without noble blood, yet commanded nobles. You were a Muslim in the inner court of a Buddhist empire. You were a eunuch who held more power than the entire Ministry of Rights. And worst of all, you had no sons, no line, no legacy that could be controlled. You were an outlier. And outliers must be destroyed to preserve the illusion of order. They strike in ink. They revise the records. Reframe your voyages as imperial indulgence. Criticize your gifts to foreign kings as treasury mismanagement. Accuse you of weakening the empire's moral fabric with foreign corruption. They do not argue with your legacy. They bury it. And the court agrees. Because it's easier to erase a man than to admit the empire was shaped by someone who wasn't supposed to matter. The ships, your ships once the pride of the oceans, are left to rot. No new vessels are commissioned. The shipyards fall quiet. The artisans who built 10-story floating palaces are reassigned to bridges and storehouses. The knowledge of how to build such ships is lost within a generation. By the end of the 15th century, China can no longer build even a third of what you once sailed, and no one seems to care, because the ocean too is forgotten. Under the reigns that follow, China's foreign policy collapses into insularity. Trade is restricted. Foreign embassies are turned away. Maps you commissioned are locked away, marked non-essential. Some are burned. No one is allowed to mention the African giraffe. No one is allowed to discuss the kings of Mecca, Calicut, or Mogadishu. No one asks what happened to the admiral who once made the world tremble. Because in the Confucian mind, the world outside China is barbarian, and to pay attention to it is to weaken the center. And so your name, once shouted in 10 languages across oceans, becomes a whisper, then a myth, then nothing. And what does the empire gain from erasing you? Nothing, because as your maps are buried and your ships decay, the rest of the world moves forward. The Portuguese round Africa, the Spanish cross the Atlantic, the Dutch and English begin carving empires by sea, and China forgets how to sail. The empire that once ruled the oceans withdraws behind its walls, proud of its ignorance, arrogant in its isolation. By the time Europeans knock on its ports with gunboats and treaties, it has forgotten what you once taught it, that awe is a kind of power, that the sea is not a threat, it is an opportunity, that diplomacy, tribute and warfare can ride on the same wind. Your grave still stands on Newshow Hill, but your body is not there. There are no bones, no ashes, only a set of ceremonial robes, a cap, a few coins. It is a symbolic burial because the court never brought your remains back. Or maybe it did, and then chose to hide the truth, just as they hid your life. Some whisper that your body was thrown into the sea. Others say it was brought back in secret, buried at night with no ceremony. The truth doesn't matter now, because what they buried wasn't you, it was your story. But they couldn't erase everything, because in Sri Lanka, the stone you carved still stands declaring peace and tribute in 3 tongues. In East Africa, fragments of your porcelain still glint in the red soil. In Indonesia, Chinese communities trace their legends back to your visits. In Arabia, stories of a Chinese admiral who spoke the Quran still echo in port cities. And in the hearts of sailors, you became something else entirely. Not a man, but a warning, a myth, a question left unanswered. The truth is, they didn't erase you because you were a failure. They erased you because you were a threat, because you proved that a eunuch could outmaneuver ministers, that a boy born far from the center could command the world, that loyalty could build an empire just as surely as blood. You were a living contradiction, and empires do not tolerate contradictions for long. History moved on without you. The emperors changed, the borders changed, the ships were rebuilt but smaller, weaker. The oceans once ruled by your shadow were now ruled by men who never knew your name. And yet, every time a storm rises off the Indian Ocean, every time a trader from Calicut whispers to his son about ships like floating temples, Every time a child in Nanjing hears the name Zheng He and asks, "Was he real?" your ghost stirs, because the truth cannot stay buried forever. You never wore a crown, you never claimed a throne, you bore no title that would be passed down, you had no sons to carry your name, no bloodline to inherit your victories, no grave where flowers bloom each spring, and yet you ruled more than kings ever did, not through blood, not through conquest, but through presence, through awe, through silence that bent men's knees. You were the emperor's blade, sheathed in silk, the hand that reached across oceans, the ghost they could not kill because they had never truly seen it. You were the Shadow King. The ministers thought power came from ritual, from family names, from ancestors and lineages, from bureaucracy and orthodoxy. You proved otherwise. You came from the margins, a child of Muslims, taken from a mountain village no noble ever heard of. You were mutilated, silenced, erased, and yet you bent the entire Indian Ocean to your will. You made sultans kneel. You carried emperors' names to lands they could barely imagine. You wrapped the globe in invisible cords of diplomacy and fear, all without a drop of royal blood, all without a single drop of your own to pass on. You were a servant, but you gave orders no general dared question. You were mutilated, but your presence emasculated kings. You had no family, but emperors called you brother. You were supposed to be invisible, but entire continents saw only you when they imagined China. You were both weapon and wound, symbol and secret. The future and everything the empire feared about it. What you built without building. No one talks about what came back with you besides the gifts. You brought new navigational techniques, exotic medical knowledge, plants and spices that would transform imperial diets, cultural practices that shaped palace art and music for generations. You also brought ideas that China was not alone, that there were other gods, other systems, other powers rising, far beyond the Great Wall. But the ministers shut their ears. They called your maps heresy, your reports fiction, your influence a threat, and so they erased the ocean from China's imagination, until it came crashing back, centuries later, on foreign ships armed and demanding. Had they listened to you, history might have gone differently. The boys who served on your ships, they became legends in foreign ports. Some stayed behind marrying locals, teaching Chinese language and astrology, building bridges between cultures no court in Beijing ever sanctioned. You'd created a diaspora, not just of people, but of ideas. They called themselves sons of the sea dragon, heirs of the fleet, descendants of a voyage that stretched beyond memory. And though you never had children of your own, your legacy, your real legacy, multiplied in every village where your name was remembered, even in myth. You were buried, but never forgotten. Even when China pretended your voyages never happened, your name was etched in coral temple ruins in Indonesia. Your coins were discovered in a Kenyan grave. Your fleet's porcelain resurfaced in Arab bazaars. Your legend survived in every whisper of a man who came from the sea and changed everything. And in the 20th century, centuries after your death, China would finally resurrect your name. They'd call you a hero again. They'd rebuild replicas of your treasure ships. They'd write textbooks about your voyages. They'd name naval vessels after you. But it was too late, because the China you served no longer existed. And the man you were? He could never have existed in the modern world. So what were you? An admiral? A eunuch? A slave made powerful? Yes, all of that. But more. You were a test of what empire does to loyalty, of what greatness looks like when it's born from suffering, of what silence can become when it's honed into steel. You were a mirror held up to an empire that called itself eternal, showing it that the greatest among them might come from the lowest rung. And they broke that mirror because they feared what they saw. They took your body, they erased your voice, they buried your records. But they could not take the one thing you mastered better than any emperor: impermanence. You knew how to fade, how to move with the tide, how to haunt instead of dominate. You didn't rule in palaces, you ruled in memory, and memory once seeded in the minds of 1,000 cultures, cannot be erased by decree. Sometimes, a tourist walks through the shipyard in Nanjing, where your fleet was born. They look at the scale models and laugh. No way ships this big existed in the 1400s. Sometimes, a child in East Africa picks up a cracked porcelain shard and wonders where it came from. Sometimes, a Muslim merchant in Indonesia points to the stars and whispers to his grandson, "The admiral came from that direction. His sails blocked the sun." And sometimes when the Yangtze River fog rolls thick into the hills, they say a figure can be seen walking alone on the old docks, cloaked in silence, back straight, eyes sharp, still inspecting the fleet, still watching the water, still waiting. You never had a throne, but your name crossed oceans. You never had a crown, but kings bowed before you. You never had heirs, but your story lives. You were never meant to matter, but you did, more than most. And so when we remember you now, we do not remember you as just a eunuch, or a general, or a forgotten admiral. We remember you for what you truly were, the Shadow King. If this story shook you, if it made you feel the weight of history in a way no textbook ever could do, not let it fade. Like, comment below where you're listening from and what stories you want told next. Soti, subscribe for more stories that empires tried to erase. Because behind every golden throne, every marble hall, every glorious empire, there are ghosts like Zheng He, and it's time we remembered them.